She sat in her car for 20 minutes staring at her phone. The message was typed out. All she had to do was press send. But once she did, there would be no going back. Her hands trembled slightly as her thumb hovered over the screen. She wasn't just about to send a text. She was about to detonate a bomb that would obliterate friendships that had existed for over a decade. Some people say the truth will set you free. What they don't tell you is that freedom sometimes costs you everyone you love. This isn't a story about heroes and villains. This is about the impossible space between loyalty and honesty, between protecting your friends and protecting what's right. This is about what happens when you're the only person who knows the truth, and speaking it means becoming the enemy. Before we dive into the story, I need to ask you something. Hit that like button and subscribe, because by the end of this story, you're going to need someone to talk to about what you just heard. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And more importantly, tell me what you would have done in this situation, because I promise you, by the time we're finished here, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about friendship, truth, and the price of doing what's right. Let me tell you about Sarah. She was 32 years old when her world imploded. She had been part of the same friend group since college. 10 years of inside jokes, of birthday parties, of late-night confessions over wine, of weddings where they stood up for each other, of vacations where they made memories they swore they'd never forget. 10 people who knew each other's histories, who had seen each other through breakups and job losses and family tragedies. They weren't just friends, they were chosen family. In any group that close, there are dynamics, hierarchies that nobody talks about but everyone understands. There was Marcus, the charismatic center, who somehow made everyone feel like he was his best friend. There was Jen, his girlfriend of 5 years, quiet but sharp, the one who remembered everyone's coffee order and always knew when something was wrong. There was David, the funny one, who could diffuse any tension with a joke. There was Rachel, ambitious and driven, always the first to celebrate your wins. And then there were the others, each with their role, their place in the ecosystem of this carefully balanced group. Sarah was the reliable one, the one people came to when they needed advice, the one who listened without judgment, who kept secrets, who showed up when you needed her. She took that role seriously, maybe too seriously, because when you're the person everyone trusts, you end up holding a lot of weight that isn't yours to carry. It started at Rachel's engagement party. Sarah was in the kitchen refilling drinks when she heard voices from the hallway. She wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but then she heard Jen's voice, tight with emotions, saying something that made Sarah freeze with the wine bottle halfway to a glass. And then she heard Marcus respond, his voice low and urgent in a way that made her stomach drop. What Sarah overheard in that hallway would change everything. But it wasn't just what she heard. It was what she saw over the following weeks when she started paying attention. The way Marcus would check his phone and then make excuses to leave early. The way Jen had stopped making eye contact with certain people in the group. The way Rachel had started drinking more at their gatherings. Her laughter just a little too loud, a little too forced. Sarah spent weeks trying to convince herself she had misunderstood, that there was some explanation that made sense, that she could just stay quiet and everything would work itself out on its own. But the truth has a way of demanding to be acknowledged. And what Sarah had discovered was this. Marcus, the friend everyone adored, the center of their social universe, was having an affair with Rachel, his girlfriend Jen's supposed friend. And it wasn't a drunken mistake or a moment of weakness. It had been going on for 8 months. Let me pause here and let that sink in. Because this isn't just about cheating. This is about betrayal that radiated outward like cracks in ice. Jen, who trusted these people with her life. Rachel, who had sat with Jen through her mother's cancer diagnosis. Who had helped her pick out furniture for the apartment she shared with Marcus. Who had listened to her talk about wanting to have children with him someday. And Marcus, who had stood in front of all of them at various times and talked about commitment, about loyalty, about how lucky he was to have Jen. Sarah carried this knowledge for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of going to group dinners and pretending everything was normal. 3 weeks of watching Jen laugh at Marcus's jokes while Sarah's chest tightened with the weight of what she knew. 3 weeks of catching Rachel's eye across the table and seeing something there. A challenge, maybe. A dare. Does she know that I know? And if she does, is she betting that I'll stay quiet? Research has consistently shown that keeping secrets takes a profound psychological toll. Studies by psychologist Michael Slepian and colleagues have found that it's not just the cognitive load of remembering what you're supposed to hide, it's the way secrets create a barrier between you and the people you care about. Every interaction becomes a performance. Every conversation requires you to carefully monitor what you say. The secret becomes a wall between your authentic self and the version of yourself you present to the world. And that wall, that constant vigilance, exhausts you in ways that are hard to explain to someone who hasn't experienced it. But there's another side to this equation. Because what about loyalty? What about the unspoken rule that you don't betray your friends? In any close-knit group, there's an understanding that what happens within the circle stays within the circle, that you protect each other, even when it's messy, even when it's complicated. The group comes first, always. Sarah found herself caught between two impossible choices: stay silent and become complicit in the betrayal of someone she cared about, or speak up and become the person who destroyed the group. Because she knew, with a certainty that sat like a stone in her stomach, that telling the truth would not end well for her. In situations like this, people don't thank the messenger, they destroy them. She talked to her sister about it, carefully avoiding names and details. Her sister said what most people would say: "You have to tell Jen, she deserves to know." But her sister wasn't part of the group. She didn't understand the weight of years of friendship, the complexity of relationships that had roots going back a decade. She didn't understand that telling Jen meant choosing her over everyone else. It meant accepting that Marcus and Rachel would never forgive her. It meant knowing that the others would have to pick sides, and history showed that people usually sided with the charismatic center, not with the person who disrupted the peace. Sarah spent a weekend reading everything she could find about similar situations. She discovered that her experience wasn't unique. Stories emerge regularly of people who discovered wrongdoing within their friend groups and faced the same impossible choice. In documented cases, one woman lost most of her friends after revealing that a member of their group was taking advantage of another friend with a drinking problem. A man was ostracized from his entire social circle after coming forward with evidence that someone in the group had falsified documents at work. The pattern was consistent. The truth might eventually come out, but the person who told it rarely recovered their place in the group. Psychologists have documented this as the kill the messenger phenomenon. When people are confronted with information that disrupts their worldview or forces them to acknowledge uncomfortable truths, they often direct their anger at the person who brought the information, rather than at the person who committed the wrongdoing. It's a defense mechanism involving scapegoating and cognitive dissonance. It's easier to label the truth teller as a troublemaker, a gossip, someone with ulterior motives, than it is to face the fact that someone you love has been lying to you. Sarah made her decision on a Tuesday night. She asked Jen to meet her for coffee, just the two of them. She had rehearsed what she would say 100 times in her head, but when the moment came, the words felt clumsy and inadequate. How do you tell someone that their life is built on a lie? How do you be the person who breaks their heart, even when you're doing it to save them from something worse? Jen didn't believe her at first. That was the hardest part. Not anger, not tears, just this flat, disbelieving stare that said, "You're lying to me." Sarah had expected this. She had evidence. Screenshots of messages she had seen on Rachel's phone at a party when Rachel had left it unlocked on the counter. Timestamps that lined up with Marcus's unexplained absences. Details that were too specific to be fabricated. The truth has a particular texture. You can feel it even when you don't want to. And Sarah watched as Jen's face change as the disbelief crumbled into something raw and more terrible. She didn't break down crying. She went very still and very quiet. Then she thanked Sarah in a voice that sounded like it was coming from very far away, and she left. Sarah drove home thinking that the hard part was over. She had no idea it was just beginning. Within 48 hours, the entire group knew. But the story that spread wasn't the truth about Marcus and Rachel's affair. It was a different story. One that painted Sarah as jealous, vindictive, someone who had always been secretly in love with Marcus and couldn't stand to see him happy. It was a story that turned her from truth teller to villain in one swift, coordinated rewriting of reality. Marcus and Rachel had gotten ahead of the revelation. They admitted to the affair, but spun it as a recent development, a moment of weakness they were both devastated about. They said they had been planning to come clean, but Sarah had weaponized the information to hurt them. They questioned her motives, her timing, her character, and people believed them. Or at least, people chose to believe them because it was easier than accepting that two people they loved were capable of such sustained deception. The group chat that had been active multiple times a day for years went silent. Then a new one started, one without Sarah.
She found out about it when someone accidentally mentioned it in front of her at a mutual friend's birthday party. That was the moment she realized she wasn't just losing her place in the group, she had already lost it. She was already gone. David stopped responding to her texts, Rachel blocked her on everything. Marcus wrote her a message saying she had betrayed the group's trust by spreading lies and causing drama. But the worst was watching the people she thought would stand by her distance themselves one by one. Because standing by her meant standing against Marcus and Rachel, and that was too high a price for most people to pay. The isolation was crushing. It wasn't just losing 10 friends, it was losing her entire social structure. Birthday parties she wasn't invited to, weekend trips she heard about through Instagram posts, inside jokes she was no longer part of, the casual cruelty of erasure, of being edited out of a story that had once been partly hers. Jen left Marcus, but even she couldn't fully trust Sarah after that. The friendship between them had been irrevocably altered by the revelation. Sarah had saved Jen from wasting more years with someone who didn't value her, but she had also been the person who shattered Jen's sense of reality. And humans are complicated creatures. Sometimes we resent the people who force us to face painful truths, even when we know intellectually that they did the right thing. 6 months passed. Then a year. Sarah built a new life slowly, carefully. She made new friends, though it was harder this time. She carried the weight of what had happened, the knowledge that honesty had cost her a community she had spent a decade building. She questioned herself constantly. Had she been right to tell? Should she have found a different way? Would it have been better to stay silent? Then, almost 2 years after everything fell apart, she got a message. It was from David, the friend who had stopped speaking to her. He said he was sorry. He said he had found out things that made him realize she had been telling the truth all along. He said Marcus and Rachel's relationship had imploded spectacularly, that there had been other lies, other betrayals. He said he wished he had believed her. He said he understood if she couldn't forgive him. He said he understood if she couldn't forgive him. More apologies followed. Slow, awkward admissions from people who had ostracized her that they had been wrong. But here's the thing about vindication. It doesn't erase the damage. It doesn't give you back the years you spent rebuilding your life from scratch. It doesn't undo the nights you cried yourself to sleep wondering if you were crazy, if you had imagined the whole thing, if you had destroyed everything for nothing. Sarah accepted some of the apologies. She kept her distance from others. The friend group never recovered. How could it? The trust was gone. The foundation cracked beyond repair. Some people tried to restart things, to create a new version of what they had before, but it was like trying to rebuild a house on a sinkhole. The ground was too unstable. And Sarah? She learned something that nobody wants to learn, that doing the right thing doesn't always lead to the right outcome, that truth-telling doesn't come with guarantees, that sometimes you have to choose between being liked and being honest, and that choice will haunt you regardless of what you pick. But she also learned this. She could live with herself. At 3 in the morning, when she couldn't sleep, when she replayed everything in her mind, she knew she had done what she believed was right. She had chosen Jen's well-being over her own comfort. She had refused to be complicit in a betrayal that would have continued for who knows how long. And that meant something, even when it felt like it meant nothing. There's no neat resolution to this story. No moment where everyone realizes the truth and Sarah gets welcomed back in with open arms. Real life isn't like that. Real life is messy and complicated and full of consequences that ripple outward in ways you can never fully predict. The truth did set Sarah free, in a sense, but freedom came with a price that she's still paying. So now I'm going to ask you the question that Sarah asked herself every day for 2 years. What would you have done? If you knew something that would destroy your friend group but save someone from ongoing deception, would you speak up? If loyalty to one friend meant betrayal of another, which would you choose? If telling the truth meant losing everyone, would you still tell it? There's no right answer. That's what makes it so devastating. But I want you to think about it. I want you to sit with that discomfort, that uncertainty, that terrible knowledge that sometimes there are no good options, only less bad ones. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think Sarah did the right thing. Tell me if you've ever been in a situation like this, or if you know someone who has. Tell me what loyalty means to you, and what truth means to you, and where you draw the line between the two. Hit that like button if this story made you feel something, if it made you question something, if it made you realize how complicated human relationships really are. Subscribe because next week we're diving into another story about impossible choices and the people who make them. Another story about what happens when doing the right thing leads to all the wrong consequences. Should secrets always be told? Who do you think was truly right or wrong in this situation? These are questions that don't have easy answers, but they're questions worth asking. Because someday you might be the one standing in Sarah's shoes with a truth in your hands and an impossible decision to make. And when that day comes, you'll need to have already figured out who you want to be. Until next time, remember this. The truth may not always set you free, but living with lies will definitely imprison you. The question is, which prison are you willing to inhabit?